Hey, good morning, Trinium friends, and welcome to this week's edition of Patio Ponderings. My unusual patio today is the Trinium Lutheran Church kitchen, and right behind me is this kind of ginormous first aid kit to tend to any mishaps that happen in this kitchen or elsewhere in the church. And that leads right into what I've been thinking about this week. So our story on Sunday takes place in the very early church. Peter and the disciples are proclaiming the good news of Jesus' death and resurrection. And in the process of that, they're doing miracles and wondrous signs. And part of that is healing. So here's the verse that I've been particularly thinking about. Even large numbers of persons from towns around Jerusalem would gather, bringing the sick and those harassed by unclean spirits, and everyone was healed. This is Acts chapter 5, verse 16. Now, I think it's likely that all of us, for ourselves or for a loved one, have prayed for healing. And sometimes that healing happens. It happens either through the care of doctors and nurses, medicine and that type of thing. Sometimes it happens miraculously. Sometimes, oftentimes, too often, the healing eludes us and we continue to suffer with physical illness or mental illness or injury or addiction or any of those things that can plague our bodies and our spirits and our minds. And this is a thing that we so often wrestle with in our faith. It gets back to the question of, why does God allow suffering? So much of Jesus' ministry was about healing people, and yet in our modern day times, we don't always see that kind of thing happen. And it begs a lot of questions. It is, I think, one of the bigger mysteries in our faith as to why do some people experience healing and why others don't. And I can't resolve that for you today or maybe ever, but we can look to a couple different things to maybe help us frame the question and to think about it. So the first thing I always talk about in this arena is to think about what is the difference between cure and healing. So sometimes our physical ailments or injuries are actually cured, they go away, and we become healthy again. But even if we don't experience a cure, we sometimes experience healing in the midst of that, even in the midst of great suffering. It could be a healing of hurts or a sense of peace and comfort that doesn't make sense given what we're going through. Healing can still happen in different ways. The other example that I want to bring up to you is the example I used with our children in our kids' message on Sunday. And we talked about, sometimes we get sick, sometimes we get injured, and what do? We go to our parents, our loving parents, our mother or our father or whoever our caregiver is. And they tend to us. They clean up our wounds as best they can. They put a Band-Aid on our scraped up knees. They kiss our boo-boos. Or when we're sick, they, tuck us into a blanket and do whatever they can to make us feel loved and cared for and to have a sense of well-being. And I think that is the image that no matter what else is happening in our illness or injury, that is what Jesus does for us. That we can so often still have this sense of well-being, this sense of peace, even in the midst of illness or injury and suffering. What do you think? When you think of healing, when you think of the healing ministry that Jesus does, when you think of healing in our modern day and time, how do you think about it? Have you seen anyone miraculously healed? Do you believe that can still happen? how do you wrestle with the questions of when we pray for healing and it doesn't seem to come? How do you work through that? As always, I would love to hear what you have to say. We are coming up on a vacation weekend. It is also our Memorial Day, when we think of those who did not experience healing on the battlefield, who were injured and faced death. And we have had to deal with that as a country and as families and as communities. So I ask that you remember those people in prayer, that we continue to pray for peace, that those kinds of injuries may be no more in our country and in our world. Hope to see you on Sunday, either in person or online. Have a good weekend, a safe weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye.